Hello, friends. I thought I'd chat with you today about something that I find enjoyable to discuss, especially since it's been a kind of a weird weekend and Mother's Day is a little bit of a weepy event for me. So I thought it might be fun, which is a word I think I use too much, and I really don't have that much fun, which is also kind of weird, to discuss a subject near and dear to my heart, which is the things that scare me. And you wouldn't think that would be a soothing or a comforting thing to think about, but I've been fascinated by the things that scare me since I was a very young age. The first time I remember being scared was watching an episode of Scooby-Doo in which Dracula or a vampire or a lowercase d Dracula shows up. And I remember having nightmares about that for nights afterward, in which Dracula showed up and rung my doorbell, and I still have those dreams today. So I discovered at a really young age that I got scared very easily, but at the same time, I obsessed over the things that scared me. As an adult, those things have changed a little bit, but not too much. I'm not afraid of growing sick and dying, or I'm not afraid of robberies or real world things that might actually happen to me. No, I'm afraid of the vampires and the werewolves and the zombies and all of those sorts of things. In recent years, though, I guess as I've gotten older, I can't find the same comfort in, say, the horror movies that I used to love. They stress me out a little bit too much. The last one, though, that really freaked me out was Hereditary, and I don't want to spoil anything, but there were 3 scenes in particular that were kind of freaky, and if you watched it, you probably, or you know what I'm talking about. But at the same time, they seem to me like, do you ever read a poem, for example, where you come across this line and it's so beautiful and so perfect, and you get the sense that perhaps the poet built the entire poem around this line? I get the sense that Hereditary was built primarily around these pivotal, horrifying scenes. But my only point was, I guess not a lot of horror movies freak me out anymore. I saw that one in 2017 or so. That was the last time I remember being legitimately scared by a movie. But I do have a list of 4 or 5 things that consistently freak me out. The first one is a dream that I have. I will walk into a room, maybe the kitchen or the living room, and I'll go to flip the light switch and it won't come on. And at that point, I know this is about to descend into the depths of a nightmare. And I've gotten pretty adept at waking myself up before that even happens. But that leads to another thing I find pretty freaky. In horror movies like Poltergeist, for example, when you observe Carol Ann, I think her name was, the little girl, sitting in the living room watching a staticky TV. Or if a character is in the house and the phone rings and it's a monster or a ghost or whatever, and they pull the phone out of the wall and it's not even plugged in anymore and it rings. Or I guess any sort of technology that is somehow obsolete or broken, but it's still somehow working. That freaks me out. And I think that might be in part also because I'm a little bit freaked out by technology. I'm not entirely convinced that elves and gnomes aren't, behind the inner workings of our circuit boards or our car engines, for example. So that leads into another cinematic moment that to this day I still get just ripples of goose flesh across my skin when I think about it. There is a book by an author named Anne River Siddons, who I think is sort of like a Southern charm type of writer. She might write some, maybe something you read in school, but So it might be a little bit deeper than just Southern Gal Book Club kind of stuff. I don't know. I've never read any of her other books. But she did write what Stephen King calls her lone foray into the horror genre. This is The House Next Door. And to briefly sum it up, it's about a couple, I believe their names are Colquitt and Walter, which are very just whitest of white bread people names, I think, who live in a pretty upper class, upper middle class community. They're pretty snooty for it anyway. And they're living their normal white bread lives, and all of a sudden construction for a house goes up next door. And over the course of the story, a series of tragedies occur, and it turns out that the house is haunted, or maybe the person who built it is haunted, or maybe it's a combination of both. And I won't give anything more away, except to tell you that there is a Lifetime version of this book, and it is so terrible. But if you read the book and if you enjoy it, I highly suggest that you bathe in the terribleness that is this Lifetime adaptation. Also, Mark Paul Gosselaar is in it, of Saved by the Bell fame, which does not save the adaptation, but it's worth watching if you like the book. But at any rate, there's a scene in the book where Colquitt befriends the newest family to have moved into the house. And it's a husband and a wife, and the wife is a little bit off, and you learn that her boy was killed in the war, and so she's still grieving, and that's making life difficult for the couple. And with the house's history and the malevolent energies that seem to be within its very walls, it's affecting the couple. And at one point, the wife runs over next door to Colquitt's house, and she says, "Oh, please come with me. I have to show you something." And so they go into the darkened house. I don't know if that's actually setting the scene for you. I'm remembering it the way it is embedded in my memory. But they run into the darkened house, and you hear the TV blaring. And they go into the living room, and the TV is staticky, but you can see a helicopter going down. And you hear this tinny, high-pitched voice saying, "Mom? Mom?" And oh my God, I could not be in the house alone after imagining that scene. That terrified me. I don't know if the adaptation does it justice. Whew, it was some scary stuff. The other thing I wanted to mention that freaks me out on a few different levels is the story The Human Chair by Edogawa Rampo, who is a Japanese Gothic writer, and I didn't research him enough before I started talking about this, so I don't know all that much about him. I don't want to say he's Japan's answer to Edgar Allan Poe, because that's a little too easy. But he does write some freaky stuff. And the story in particular that I'm thinking of is The Human Chair, in which a woman is sitting in her very comfortable chair reading a letter that she's gotten from a stranger, in which he confesses, he's a chair maker, and he confesses that he's been constructing these chairs that he hides in, and he grows obsessed with not exactly human contact, or maybe that's the case, but in the course of hiding himself in chairs and hotel lobbies or wherever else he's doing this, he falls in love with the wife of a important official. And I believe she's an artist or a writer, and he's talking about his obsession with her. And the woman in the chair, it dawns on her with a sickening chill that she is the woman he is talking about. At the end of the story, I think he brings it around to maybe, oh, ha ha ha, this isn't real, or something like that. I don't quite remember it. It's been a while since I've read it, but not the thought of someone hiding in my chair exactly. That's pretty outlandish. But the thought of, and you hear urban legends about this too. Someone has, been living in your attic for years. You know, you come home from work and you find the refrigerator door open, or their pantry items missing, or such things. And so that freaks me out a little bit. And it's not for an irrational reason, I don't think. When I was younger, in my late 20s, I was in a relationship where the man that I had been involved with broke into my home. And I had come home and I had seen that the window was open and there was dirt by the window. And I was a pretty oblivious type of soul then. I am not so much now, I hope. And at first I didn't think of it. And it turns out he was waiting for me in my bedroom. It could have been a lot worse than it was. Upon reflection, it was pretty bad. But yeah, so this is not an unfounded fear of mine that someone is hiding in my house. Although in most of these stories, these are just homeless people, looking for some food and shelter. But that's still kind of freaky. Someone in your house that you did not invite. And so the human chair sort of brings up those fears for me. I couldn't find a copy of the anthology I have, but I do have the spoken word album. This was put out by Cadabra Records, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't listened to it yet, and now I don't think I can because I've gotten myself so worked up about it, but we'll see, maybe at the end of the day. The last thing I want to mention is, it's a bit of a cheat because I can't exactly tell you much about it. It's been a while since I read it. But the story is The Lady Maid's Bell by Edith Wharton. And in it, a maid takes a position out sort of in a gloomy country estate. And she's caring for a woman who has been unwell. I believe the woman's previous companion or maid had died maybe 6 months earlier, and they couldn't find a replacement for her. And there's mysterious goings on in the house, and for the life of me, I can't remember what they were. But what I can tell you is that I was reading this story on a chilly afternoon when I lived up in New Jersey, maybe February. It was getting dark earlier in the day, and so it was dim in the house, and I was sitting with my back to a window, and I don't think this makes any difference to the story. I really can conjure up where I was and how it felt to be there. And I came to a point in the story, and it's not a very long story, but I read something, and I don't think I have ever jumped so high or been so startled. And I think I've read the story since, and I couldn't even find the passage it was that frightened me so badly. It just must have been where I was at that time in my life. It must have been the atmosphere of the house that I was alone in at the time. But that really frightened me, and that is one I think I will reread because I'm excited to find that again. Oh, and one more. There is one more. There is a story by Algernon Blackwood. I think it's Blackwood. It's either him or M.R. James, but I think it's Algernon Blackwood who wrote The Wendigo. And that takes place up in, I don't know, upstate New York, or maybe the New York-Canada border. That is how that works, right? My geography is terrible. But anyway, it's some Native Americans and maybe some loggers. I'm not exactly sure who these people are or why they're together. Maybe the Native American Indian is guiding these folks somewhere. But anyway, there's this entity sort of like up in the trees and sweeping in and stealing people away. And there's just, it's beautifully written, and it's a little bit confusing, but it's also kind of terrifying, especially if you read it out loud. There's just some beautifully terrifying passages in it. Anyway, those are some things that still scare me as an adult. They're not quite the same things that scared me as a child. For example, my cousin's Kiss rock band posters scared the crap out of me when I was a little girl. which is funny because I grew up to later love that kind of theatrical costumery and music. But yeah, I was scared by some funny things as a kid, but that led to my fascination with horror and being scared as an adult. In the comments, why don't you let me know some of the things that scare you? I'd be super excited to find that out. Thanks for watching my video, and till next time, weirdos.